The church was suffocating, its stained glass windows casting fractured rainbows across the pews, but Evelyn Harper felt only gray. Her best friend, Clara Monroe, lay in the open casket at the altar, her vibrant spirit snuffed out by a car accident that no one saw coming. Evelyn's heart clawed at her chest, screaming truths she'd buried for years, truths she'd never dared to voice. Not to her family, not to Clara, not even to herself. She sat in the back row, her hands twisting the program into a crumpled mess. Her mother, Patricia, sat 2 rows ahead, her posture rigid, her face a mask of practiced grief. The Harpers were a family of silences, where emotions were tucked away like heirlooms too fragile to touch. Evelyn, at 28, had perfected the art of being unseen, her voice a whisper in a household that prized propriety over passion. But today, with Clara gone, silence felt like betrayal. Clara had been the opposite, bold, unapologetic, a wildfire in human form. At 27, she'd lived louder in a single day than Evelyn had in a decade. They'd met in college, 2 opposites drawn together. Evelyn, the quiet literature major who hid behind books, and Clara, the art student who painted her truths on canvases and wore her heart on her sleeve. Their friendship had been instant, electric, but for Evelyn it had always been more. She'd loved Clara in secret, her heart a locked diary she was too afraid to open. The minister's voice droned on, recounting Clara's life in sterile platitudes. Evelyn's eyes burned as she stared at the casket, at the red scarf draped over it, Clara's favorite, the one she'd worn when they'd walked through the park last autumn, laughing until their sides ached. That day, Clara had grabbed Evelyn's hand, her touch lingering too long, her blue eyes searching Evelyn's face for something she couldn't name. Evelyn had pulled away, terrified of what it meant, terrified of what she felt. Now that moment haunted her, a chance she'd let slip through her fingers. The congregation stood for a hymn, but Evelyn stayed seated, her legs leaden. She glanced at her mother, who caught her eye and frowned, a silent command to conform. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She'd spent her life obeying those unspoken rules. Don't speak too loudly, don't feel too deeply, don't love the wrong person. But Clara had never followed rules. She'd painted murals on campus walls, kissed girls at parties, and told Evelyn, "You don't have to be what they want. You can be you." The hymn ended, and the minister invited people to share memories. One by one, Clara's friends and colleagues spoke, her art professor, her roommate, her cousin. Each story painted a piece of Clara, but none captured her fully. Evelyn's heart pounded. She wanted to stand, to scream that she knew Clara best, that she'd memorized the way Clara's laugh could light up a room, the way her fingers smudged paint on her jeans, the way her voice softened when she said Evelyn's name. But fear kept her glued to the pew. Until it didn't. Evelyn stood, her legs trembling, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. The church fell silent, all eyes on her. Her mother's frown deepened, but Evelyn didn't look at her. She walked to the podium, clutching the crumpled program like a lifeline. She didn't know what she'd say, only that she couldn't let Clara's life pass without telling the truth. "I'm Evelyn," she began, her voice cracking. "Clara was my best friend." She paused, the weight of those words too small for what Clara had been. But she was more than that. She was everything. The room shifted, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she pressed on. "Clara saw me when I was invisible. She taught me to laugh, to dream, to feel. And I loved her. Not just as a friend. I loved her with every piece of my heart, even when I was too afraid to say it." Her mother gasped, a sharp sound that cut through the silence. Evelyn's eyes flicked to her, then away. She focused on the casket, on the red scarf, on Clara. "I never told her," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was too scared of my family, of what people would think, of losing her. But I'm not scared anymore. Clara deserved to be loved out loud. And I'm sorry I didn't give her that while she was here." The church was a sea of stunned faces, but Evelyn didn't care. She felt lighter, as if years of silence had lifted from her chest. She stepped down from the podium, her legs steady now, and walked back to her seat. Her mother's eyes bored into her, but Evelyn met her gaze, unyielding. For the first time she felt like herself. As the service ended, people avoided her, their whispers trailing like shadows. But a few approached, Clara's cousin who hugged her tightly, and an old friend from college who said, "She loved you too, you know." Evelyn's heart stuttered, hope and grief colliding. Had Clara felt the same? The question would haunt her, but it also set her free. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, the leaves a riot of red and gold. Evelyn walked to the park where she and Clara had spent so many afternoons. She sat on their favorite bench, the one overlooking the pond, and pulled Clara's red scarf from her bag. She'd taken it from the casket, a small act of rebellion. Wrapping it around her neck, she closed her eyes and let herself feel everything. The love, the loss, the courage she'd finally found. The days after the funeral were a storm of silence and shouting. Evelyn's family didn't speak of her eulogy, but their disapproval hung heavy in the air. Her mother, Patricia, avoided her, her lips a tight line whenever Evelyn entered a room. Her father, Richard, buried himself in his newspaper, pretending nothing had changed. Her younger brother, Tommy, was the only one who looked at her with curiosity instead of judgment, but even he didn't ask questions. The Harper household had always been a place where truths were swept under the rug, and Evelyn's confession had torn that rug to shreds. She moved through her days like a ghost, going to her job at the library, shelving books in silence. Her co-workers whispered behind her back, their eyes darting away when she looked up. The small town of Willow Creek, Massachusetts, was not kind to those who strayed from the norm. Evelyn felt the weight of their stares, but she refused to shrink. Clara's memory demanded more of her. At night she retreated to her attic bedroom, where she kept a box of Clara's things. Sketches, letters, a half-finished painting of the park where they'd spent so many hours. Evelyn traced the brushstrokes, imagining Clara's hands at work, her laughter filling the air. One night, she found a folded note tucked inside a sketchbook, Clara's messy handwriting scrawled across it. "Ev, you're braver than you think. Don't let them dim your light. See." Evelyn clutched the note to her chest, tears falling. Clara had known her better than anyone, had seen the courage she'd buried under years of fear. The note felt like a call to action, a challenge to keep living the truth she'd spoken at the funeral. But how? Her family's silence was a wall, and the town's judgment was a cage. She felt trapped, yet something in her was shifting, a spark igniting where fear had once ruled. One evening, Evelyn's mother cornered her in the kitchen. "What you said at that funeral," Patricia began, her voice low and sharp, "was selfish. You embarrassed us. Do you know what people are saying?" Evelyn's hands trembled, but she held her mother's gaze. "I was telling the truth," she said quietly. "I loved her. I'm not ashamed of that." Patricia's face flushed. "This isn't about love. It's about decency, about family. You're tearing us apart." Evelyn wanted to scream that she'd been torn apart for years, forced to hide who she was to keep the peace. Instead she said, "I'm done hiding, Mom. Clara deserved better, and so do I." The argument ended in silence as always, but it left Evelyn shaken. She needed to escape, to breathe. She grabbed her coat and drove to Boston, to a small cafe Clara had loved, where artists and dreamers gathered. The walls were covered in murals, some of Clara's work among them. Evelyn sat at a corner table, sipping coffee, watching strangers laugh and argue and live without apology. For the first time she wondered if she could belong somewhere like this, somewhere she didn't have to whisper her truths. A woman approached her, her hair dyed purple, a sketchbook under her arm. "You're Evelyn, right? Clara's friend." Evelyn nodded, wary. The woman introduced herself as Mia, an artist who'd known Clara. "She talked about you all the time," Mia said, her eyes soft. "She said you were her safe place." Evelyn's throat tightened. She wanted to ask more, to know every word Clara had said, but the pain was too raw. Instead, she listened as Mia shared stories of Clara's art, her passion, her fearlessness. Mia invited Evelyn to an art show the next weekend, a tribute to Clara's work. "You should come," she said. "Clara would have wanted you there." Evelyn hesitated, her instinct to retreat battling the spark Clara had ignited. Finally she nodded. "I'll be there." The art show was held in a loft in downtown Boston, filled with Clara's paintings, vivid, chaotic, beautiful. Evelyn walked through the exhibit, her heart aching at every canvas. One painting stopped her cold. Two women sitting on a bench by a pond, their hands almost touching, golden leaves falling around them. It was them, Evelyn and Clara, captured in a moment Evelyn hadn't realized Clara had cherished. Tears welled in her eyes as she read the title, "The Silence We Share." Mia appeared beside her. She painted that last year, she said. She told me it was about the person who made her feel whole. Evelyn's knees buckled. She'd spent so long hiding her love, convinced it was one-sided. But this painting was proof that Clara had felt something too. The realization was both a gift and a wound. As the night wore on, Evelyn met others who'd known Clara. Friends, artists, lovers. They welcomed her, not as the silent Harper girl, but as someone who'd loved Clara fiercely. For the first time, Evelyn felt seen not for who she was supposed to be, but for who she was. She left the show with a new resolve. She would live the life Clara had believed she could. Back in Willow Creek, the tension in the Harper household grew unbearable. Evelyn's confession had fractured the fragile balance of her family, and her mother's disapproval was a constant presence, like a storm cloud waiting to break. At dinner, Patricia's silence was pointed, her fork scraping against her plate. Richard tried to fill the void with small talk about the weather, but even he couldn't meet Evelyn's eyes. Only Tommy, now 19 and home from college, dared to break the quiet. "I thought what you said at the funeral was brave," he said one night, his voice low. Evelyn's heart swelled, but Patricia's sharp glance silenced him. Evelyn began spending more time in Boston, drawn to the community she'd found at the art show. She met Mia again, and they talked for hours over coffee, sharing stories of Clara and their own dreams. Mia was openly queer, unapologetic in a way Evelyn envied. "It gets easier," Mia told her one night. "Not everyone will accept you, but the ones who matter will." Evelyn wanted to believe her, but the weight of her family's expectations still anchored her to Willow Creek. One afternoon she found a letter in Clara's sketchbook, tucked between pages of charcoal drawings. It was addressed to her, written in Clara's hurried scrawl. "Ev, I don't know if I'll ever give you this, but I need to say it. I love you. Not just as my best friend, but in every way. I see the way you look at me and I'm scared too, but I'm not running. If you're ready, I'm here." The letter was dated a month before Clara's accident. Evelyn's hands shook as she read it, her heart breaking and healing all at once. Clara had loved her back. The truth was a lifeline, but it also deepened her grief. Why hadn't she been braver? She drove to the park, clutching the letter, and sat on their bench. The pond was still, the leaves a carpet of crimson and gold. She imagined Clara beside her, her laughter echoing, her hand warm in Evelyn's. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you." The wind carried her words away, but she felt Clara's presence, urging her to keep going. That night, Evelyn made a decision. She couldn't stay in Willow Creek, suffocating under her family's silence. She needed to live the life Clara had seen in her, the one she was only beginning to discover. She started looking for apartments in Boston, her savings enough for a small studio. The idea of leaving terrified her, but staying felt like a betrayal of Clara's memory. Her mother noticed the change. One morning as Evelyn packed her books, Patricia stood in the doorway, her face a mix of anger and fear. "You're throwing your life away," she said. "For what?" "A girl who's gone." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I'm not throwing anything away," she said. "I'm finally living." Patricia's eyes widened, but she said nothing, turning away as if Evelyn were already gone. The move to Boston was both a leap and a stumble. Evelyn's new apartment was tiny, with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but it was hers. She hung Clara's paintings on the walls, their colors a reminder of the life she was building. She started attending art events, meeting people who embraced her without judgment. Mia became a close friend, introducing her to a world where love wasn't a secret to be kept. But the past wasn't so easy to leave behind. Tommy called one night, his voice strained. "Mom's been talking to the pastor," he said. "She thinks you're confused. She wants you to come home." Evelyn's heart sank. She'd hoped her family might come around, but their rejection stung. Still, she refused to go back. "Tell her I'm happy," she said. "For the first time, I'm happy." The next weekend, Evelyn returned to Willow Creek for Tommy's birthday. The dinner was tense, her parents' silence louder than ever. After dessert, Tommy pulled her aside. "I found something," he whispered, handing her a small box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a tiny paintbrush charm Clara's. "She was going to give it to you," Tommy said. "I found it in her room." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Clara had planned to confess her love to make it real. The necklace was a promise they'd never get to keep. Boston became Evelyn's sanctuary, a place where she could breathe without the weight of her family's expectations. She wore Clara's necklace every day, the paintbrush charm a reminder of the love they'd shared, even if it had never been spoken aloud. She started writing, pouring her grief and hope into poetry, her words a bridge between the past and the future. At an open mic night, she read a poem about Clara, her voice trembling but strong. The applause was a warmth she hadn't known she needed. Mia was a constant presence, her friendship a steady anchor. One night, over wine in Evelyn's apartment, Mia confessed her own feelings. "I like you, Ev," she said, her eyes nervous but earnest. "Not trying to replace Clara, but I see you." Evelyn's heart raced. She wasn't ready, not yet, but Mia's words stirred something new, a possibility she hadn't dared to imagine. "I need time," she said softly. Mia nodded, her smile kind. "I'm not going anywhere." Evelyn's life in Boston blossomed. She got a job at an art gallery, surrounded by people who valued creativity and authenticity. She made friends who celebrated her, who didn't flinch when she spoke of Clara or her love for women. But the pull of Willow Creek lingered. She wanted her family to understand, to see her as she was. She wrote letters to her mother, pouring out her heart, but they went unanswered. Tommy was her only link, visiting when he could. His support a quiet rebellion against their parents' disapproval. One day, Evelyn received a call from her father. His voice was gruff, hesitant. "Your mother's sick," he said. "She's asking for you." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken to Patricia in months, but the news shook her. She drove to Willow Creek, her heart a tangle of fear and hope. At the hospital, Patricia looked frail, her eyes tired but sharp. "I don't understand you," she said, her voice weak. "But I don't want to lose you." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. Evelyn stayed for a week, helping her father and Tommy care for her mother. The conversations were stilted, but there were moments, Patricia's hand brushing hers, a faint smile when Evelyn read to her, that felt like steps toward something new. When Evelyn returned to Boston, she felt lighter, as if a piece of her past had softened. She began to explore her feelings for Mia, their friendship deepening into something more. Their first kiss was tentative, filled with the weight of Evelyn's grief and the promise of new beginnings. Mia was patient, her presence a steady light. They spent evenings walking through Boston, talking about art and love and the future. Evelyn realized she could love again, not to replace Clara, but to honor the courage Clara had inspired in her. At a gallery event, Evelyn saw a new painting by Mia, a vibrant abstract of two figures, their outlines blurred but their connection clear. "It's us," Mia said, her voice shy. Evelyn's heart swelled. She was learning to live out loud, to embrace the love she'd once hidden. Clara's memory was still there, a guiding star, but Evelyn was no longer the silent one. She was building a life that was hers unapologetically. A year after Clara's funeral, Evelyn stood at the park bench by the pond, the place where so many of her memories with Clara lived. The leaves were falling again, a cycle of loss and renewal. She wore Clara's red scarf and the paintbrush necklace, symbols of a love that had changed her. Boston had become her home, a city that embraced her truth, but she carried Willow Creek with her, a reminder of where she'd begun. Her relationship with Mia had grown, a love built on trust and shared dreams. They moved in together, their apartment filled with art and laughter. Mia's patience had given Evelyn the space to heal, to find herself beyond the shadow of her grief. They planned to open a small gallery, a space for queer artists to share their stories. Evelyn knew Clara would have loved it. Her family was still a work in progress. Patricia's health had improved, and though she struggled with Evelyn's identity, she'd started to listen. They talked on the phone sometimes, small conversations that felt like bridges being built. Richard was quieter, but he'd sent Evelyn a book of poetry for her birthday, a gesture that meant more than words. Tommy was her biggest supporter, visiting often, his pride in her a balm for old wounds. On the anniversary of Clara's death, Evelyn organized a memorial exhibit at the gallery. She displayed Clara's paintings, including The Silence We Share, alongside her own poetry. The event drew a crowd, friends, artists, strangers who'd been touched by Clara's work. Evelyn spoke, her voice steady. sharing stories of Clara's life and their love. She didn't hide, didn't whisper. She stood tall, the silent one no longer. As the night ended, Evelyn stepped outside, Mia by her side. The air was cool, the stars bright above the city. "I'm proud of you," Mia said, squeezing her hand. Evelyn smiled, her heart full. She'd lost Clara, but she'd found herself. The love she'd kept silent had given her the strength to speak, to live, to love again. She looked up at the sky, imagining Clara's laughter among the stars. "I did it," she whispered. "I'm living out loud." The wind carried her words, and for the first time Evelyn felt whole. Her love for Clara, for Mia, for herself, it was enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.